events happening. And that's just a reminder that the meeting is being recorded. So that's good to have been reminded about that. So it's a pan-Scottish event. There's events happening in Aberdeen, in Edinburgh, in Fife and Tayside, and here in Glasgow. And interestingly, there's another event tomorrow night about mathematics, run by the University of Glasgow, mathematics through knitting. So I think you had to sign up for that. I think you were sent a pack. But some fascinating events on this week, so do have a look around and see what else you might want to join. So the Scottish Network for Able Pupils has been around for some time, and we are very concerned about and interested in highly able learners, or what the rest of the world, with the exceptions actually of Wales and ourselves, might refer to as gifted and talented. And we work with teachers and with schools, disseminating ideas on learning and teaching and developments within the research field. And we've joined up with the Tile Network, which is a network interested in education, is interested in teaching and learning, whether that's in kindergarten or nursery, schools, or in higher and further education. And they're looking at sharing ways of best practice to engage learners in learning. And so it was a very natural fit for the Scottish Network for Able Pupils to team up with Carolina to talk about highly able learners and to run this session. And Carolina has done all the technical part of all of this, so we're very, very grateful to her for doing that. And I can see that there's still more people waiting to get in, so that's brilliant. Great to see.
And the other thing that we would say is Explorathon, the Tile Network and the SNAP, where we all come together, is with a desire to share information openly. So we want to make sure that good practice is available to teachers when they need it at the coalface in the classroom, and doing it in a way that's not research in journals, that's not accessible or is not useful in a way. We want to make sure that it's practical and can be useful in the classroom.
So why focus on mathematics? Well, I think, like everything else, COVID has presented a challenge for everybody, but I think it also offers us an opportunity. And I think as the months wore on, Niamh and I became very conscious that there were going to be issues for schools to face as young people came back to school, having been out of formal school learning, but they hadn't stopped learning. And indeed, for many of them, they had flourished. For children who are perhaps autistic, for example, without these other stresses of having to go to school, some of them, their learning, not all, but some, their learning took off. Similarly, with highly able learners sometimes, where being at home, in the family home, where there was access to computers, to the internet and so on, many young people began to have access to materials and opportunities and learning opportunities that in actual fact had maybe been denied them in school, or weren't maybe even recognised by school that this was something good that they could do. And so we began to think about what all of this would mean for schools as they return. And I do think COVID has thrown us a huge curveball in all aspects of our personal lives, in society, in organisations, where there's been little cracks. It's shone a huge spotlight, and that crack is now a big hole that we need to look into. But I think it does offer us an opportunity, and not least of all, the fact that we've all got so much more used to using technology offers us great opportunities. We were also very aware that mathematics can sometimes get what might be termed bad press. I remember doing a research project in a school where a young primary 7 girl said to me, "Margaret, can you explain why it is that when we're going to the gym hall to do our physical exercise and we're noisy, we're told, that's it, you're too noisy, come back to class, you're going to do more maths. But if we're noisy in the maths class, we never get to go to the gym to do more PE." And so maths is being used as a punishment sometimes. It gets bad press for being difficult. And if you're a Scottish teacher, I won't even mention the word algorithms to you and all that was entailed with that. But I think, and I'm not a mathematician myself, I'm not here today as a mathematician, but I am here today as somebody who knows about learning and teaching, who knows about high ability, and who knows and has seen the great enjoyment and excitement that can be engendered from mathematics. We're interested in raising the attainment of literacy and numeracy, and this idea of offering appropriate challenge to all. But we can't look at any of that without looking at the policy of where we are. And we're delighted that there are so many of you from so many different places, because that really means that we're going to talk about issues that you then have to say, well, what does that look like in my country? And I would argue, and Niamh would argue, that in Scotland, we are very fortunate in the policies and the legislation that we have here that cover our highly able learners. But we need to look to see, what does having good policy actually mean in practice? Because sometimes, not across the board, not in every school, but sometimes there can be a gap between what the policy and legislation allows and then what happens in practice.
But we also know that within one country, there can be great diversity. So we know within Glasgow, for example, we have some of the highest rates of social economic deprivation, but then you've seen photographs that Margaret has just shared of beautiful parts of the Highlands as well. And we can't assume that in one country, the same experience has been had by children. And we can't assume that in one country, the same experience of COVID has been had by all the children that we have. For some children, being free of some of the shackles of curriculum has allowed them to flourish during this time in terms of maths challenge. And we need to be ready for how they will re-enter the school as well.
And of course, one of the key people involved in school is the teacher. And we know from the OECD report, for example, in 2014, I could have picked many other references, but we picked these two at the moment, that teachers are and perhaps the key element in a child's learning environment. And so we, combined with our interest in mathematics, combined with our concern over the situation with COVID, thought it was important that we looked at that. I was sent a book, and I think in actual fact, the person that sent me this is here, so thank you very much. I haven't finished it yet, but in this book, it's called Mathematical Tasks, The Bridge Between Teaching and Learning. In this book, and I've kind of flicked through it, I need to sit down and read it properly, but a bit that jumped out at me is towards the end of the book, where they talk about even a dry textbook exercise can result in rich mathematics lesson if the teacher is sufficiently skilled. Responsive teaching, which takes account of the whole class and individuals, can ensure high levels of cognitive activity for every pupil. And essentially that's what we're talking about here, is how do we create these high levels of cognitive activity for the group we're talking about today, highly able mathematicians.
And one of the things we will argue is that by creating these kind of activities, you can provide challenge for all the children in your classroom. So it's not something that you necessarily need to do additionally and different. You may do, but there is also challenge that will help all of the children in your classroom.
Inclusive Teachers, Martin Rouse's writing around inclusive education talks about the head, the heart, and the hands. So what you know up here, all the stuff you learned when you were doing teacher education, what you have learned from interaction with children on a day-to-day basis, combined with what you believe, what do you really believe about this group of learners? These two things then make a difference in on what you do with your hands. In other words, the kind of classroom you create, the kinds of activities you create in your classroom, and even wider than that, what we do as a society, what we do as a country, what governing bodies do, etc. So head, heart, hands. Three important aspects, we believe, of being an inclusive teacher. I was busy typing away on my laptop, head down, the other morning, and I looked up, and out of my window was this picture. And I thought, is that a rainbow? And I got up to have a look, and indeed it was a rainbow. It was a bit dim, but it was there. And of course, a rainbow is a sign of hope. And I think first of all, I think we need signs of hope during this difficult time that we're all facing due to COVID. And I think that there is hope. I think there are things that we can do. And I think there is great hope that we can start to look not only for what we can do for highly able mathematicians, although that's the focus of today, so I am interested in them. But I think by looking sometimes at one group, you can actually start to inject hope into a whole system as well. And so we really want to stop there. We've invited some colleagues that we've worked with over the years to talk with you. And because it's a European event, we've invited 2 colleagues from Europe, one from Sweden, one from Germany, both of whom we've worked with in the past. And we've also invited a colleague from the university, Andrew, as well. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mariana Nolte from Germany. Mariana, welcome to this event. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us, and we're really looking forward to what you're going to share with us this afternoon. At least it's afternoon where I am. In the Philippines, it's very early morning. So Mariana, over to you.
Thank you. I'm very happy that you organized this event because I agree it is very important that we have information which gives us hope. And we at the university, I hope you see my screen now. You see it?
Yes.
Yes. We work with mathematically gifted students over a long time. We start with 3rd graders, and until now we extended our work up to the secondary level. We are very glad that we are able to do this. And during the times of Corona, we asked how we can get the students involved in the fostering process, interested in mathematics, continuing to work with us. Normally, we offer the students challenging problems. They allow investigations with the aim doing research while learning how to do research. They are challenging due to their complexity, complex because of the amount of information that the children have to deal with. Because of the rich mathematical contents, problems are open, and no more than the usual knowledge of the respective grade is necessary. This is very important because we also made a study how to work with this kind of problems in a regular classroom, and it was very successful. The children enjoyed it, also the children who were not identified as being gifted. We regard the development of mathematical giftedness as a process. And thinking about the research about experts and novices, we think not what is meant with by mathematical talent, but how can we develop mathematical talent. And one aspect which is obvious is that children must acquire problem-solving competences, especially in creative and unclear processes. They also must learn to control this process. And because problem solving is always combined with uncertainty, because there is a special barrier the children have to overcome, also emotional aspects are important. And the students must learn to explain what they have done and learn by this how to argue. This is a typical aspect of mathematical thinking. And so we asked how we can support the students to develop these competences. Today, I can't talk about all these aspects. I only want to talk about emotional aspects and later about communication and interaction. Because problem solving means uncertainty, because of this barrier, it is hard for many children to work on problems, and especially if these problems are in a way challenging, they are not used in school. And when we start to foster the students, they are very small. They are 8 years old, and uncertainty also may be provoked by the new situation. When they come to the university, they have to realize that they are not the best in this new group, but they are used to be the best in their classroom. So we try to support the students to accept this situation. And I think this is very important for their role in society, and when they want to be responsible, person, I don't know the word now, the persons in the society, it is important to overcome this situation. And the other aspect I want to talk about are communication and interaction aspects. And here is, okay, I'm very glad that this works now. When we work with the students, they can work alone on a problem, but they also can work with other children and talk with the others about their ideas, and with tutors or teachers about their ideas. What is very important for us is the plenary discussion, because in the plenary discussion, a growing consciousness about an individual solving process, but also about heuristics in general, is established. The children compare their different ways of solving the problem. They compare whether an argument makes sense, and they discuss the different ideas, and thus it is very important to have these plenary discussions. The development of the capability to argue is shown here. First, they find their results. They realize that they have different perspectives on the problems and different ways of solving the problems, but then they have to defend their results, to explain their ideas, to defend their ideas. And the last step is that they learn to prove their ideas. This is a step-by-step procedure. More and more they learn how to argue, and after some time they are used to they know that they didn't solve a problem before they haven't proven that they are right. When it came to Corona, we didn't know how to work with the students. We wanted to keep them interested in doing mathematics, and so we started with the youngest students to offer them circle of correspondence, and with the older students we offered digital meetings. We started in April. We sent the children a problem. They sent back their solution and got a letter with hints. We wrote a feedback which changed during the process, because step by step the requirements in a problem-solving processes were highlighted, and more they got more and more references, and the problems also became more and more difficult. What we observed was that the children get used to this form of correspondence. They were, most of the small children were very motivated and sent us letters, even if, because this is a problem, because many small children do not like to write down what they thought. We have some unsolved questions during this process. One question is how to overcome any obstacle to understand the given problems. What we did was we offered the problems with more redundance than compared with our normally fostering program. Normally the students understand the given problems very quickly, but if there is no teacher in the background who can explain any question, we have to try to avoid this problem. Then we ask how we can foster their development in communication processes, and this is a question we couldn't solve. We tried to support them to write down their answers, but it is still a question how we can foster the students. And the third question is, how can we handle support by parents? Parents normally are not involved in the problem-solving processes of their children, but in this situation, they wanted to support their students and they were uncertain about the help they can give their students. We encourage to let the children work alone. We tried to explain that some parents who liked to invent tools they are appropriate for older students are not good enough for their young children because they can suppress the development of creativity. And the children have many ideas about how to solve such problems, many more usually than parents expect them. And parents accepted this procedure. What we couldn't solve is that when I talked about the importance of the plenary session, they cannot learn to understand approaches of other students. This is not possible. And also it is not possible bringing together the different ideas and by this establishing group discussions at a higher level, at the individual level, but that's what we can do. Now we want the students to participate in digital sessions and we guide them to learn how to work in these sessions. We are organizing a Christmas session for students and their parents and invite the parents to participate in a learning environment which is based on games and mathematical activities on a lower level, so we can use the additional time which give us the lower level of problems to introduce how we work, how we use breakout rooms and other tools for digital sessions. And in January, we want to start with digital sessions. During the first sessions, we want to have only 2 or 3 students in one breakout room. Obviously, we need more persons to support the students. For the older students, we started with a circus of correspondence, but after the beginning of the new school year, we started with digital sessions. They wrote profiles and all students use cameras. That is really very important because we wanted them to use this profile to get into contact with the other students. Here is one profile. They had to write down their name, to give a picture. They told us about the languages they speak. One child told us she would speak 4 languages. Date of birth, favorite food, hobbies. When I'm older, I want to become or to do. We have a new scientist. We have new people who want to work with animals, the usual interest you find with small children. But what we found very interesting is that when we asked the students during the next session that what they remember about the other students, they remember pretty good the profiles of their peers. One problem we have with the children is how they can bring in their ideas. Normally during the sessions, when everybody is present, the tutors or the teachers go through the room, they observe the students, they give information, but they get also information about the working process. This is not possible now. So we send the students the problems 2 weeks ahead of the sessions. In the breakout room, they can discuss their ideas, and the plenary session brings again together the different ideas. But what to do with the students who are shy? We offer them the possibility to send their solutions to the tutors some days ahead of the session. And the tutors must take up these ideas in plenary discussion. They have to read it to get familiar with their ideas, so that every child, every idea, every child gets the impression, I am also recognized. This is very important for us. And because of the limited time, I thank you for the attention. If you are interested, I also have a task for a problem for you to give you some information about the problems we use.
Thank you so much, Mariana. I can see there's some questions coming in here and some ideas of video things you can use for children, work that Edinburgh University are doing, and various questions. And myself and Carolina and Neve are pulling these questions out, and we'll come back to these at the end. So keep the questions coming. Anything that pops into your head, nothing is irrelevant or silly, please pop the ideas and questions into the chat. But just now, we are going to move on to our second speaker. And our second speaker is Dr. Elizabeth Melroth from Karlstad in Sweden. I had the privilege of being in Karlstad, a beautiful place. If when we get to travel, you can ever visit. And Elizabeth has been doing some work around mathematics and works with Mariana. In fact, she's been tweeting saying what joy Mariana's work brings to young people in Hamburg. So thank you, Mariana, for your presentation. Thank you for your work in this field. And we'll hand over now to Elizabeth to hear what she has to say about what she's been involved in. Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me to this session. And I hope that I will give some ideas about what we are doing in Sweden, or what we are trying to do in Sweden to support the mathematically highly able students. And I also have a Twitter account, as you can see here. When I have seminars about highly able students, I always start by saying that my starting point is that all humans have equal value. And to helping all students, including the highly able, is not something that you can choose or to do or not to do. It's the duty of a teacher to do so. Just as much as it is the duty of a teacher to help every student. In Sweden, it has been a tradition for a very long time to focus on helping each student to reach the passing level in the school. There has been little focus, if any, to those who learn with ease and those who learn quickly, which I call the highly able students. So those who start to learn the content quicker than others, they are often not seen in the classroom or by the teacher, or they are maybe seen, but the teacher has been focused on the other end for very long. But since a few years ago, I would say maybe we started in the 90s, 1990, we have started to develop this in Sweden too. But we have a long way to go. So what happens in the Swedish school is we have to also tell you that in Sweden we have a system that the children are going in different grades. So this is year 1 to 2. When the children are 1 to 2 years old, 3 to 5 years old, they go to kindergarten, and they have most often one teacher the first 2 years, and then another teacher the next 2 years. And then they start preschool class, and then they start, maybe we can call it primary, and then the second part of primary, and then we have secondary school, and then we have upper secondary school. And we have many brilliant teachers in Sweden who have knowledge about high ability and how to support them. But there are also many who don't know about them, and we do not have any strategy, no structured support from above to support those children. So what happens is that if a child show up knowledge in mathematics when he or she comes to preschool class, maybe the preschool teacher helps the kid to learn mathematics, and maybe the kid learns mathematics into a level that is for grade 3. But then the kid moves to grade 1, and then the kid gets a new teacher, and the new teacher restart the child, because that is where everyone is supposed to be. But maybe the kid has a teacher who knows about high ability and know how to support the child, which can affect that the child has math knowledge up to grade 6 when he or she starts grade 4 and get a new teacher. And then the kid has to restart. Oh, sorry, that was not supposed to happen. So the kid has to restart doing mathematics. That is very common. And what happens between every transition between a teacher, a lot of children are forced to restart doing what they already know, because the next teacher don't know or don't trust the former teacher about the kid's knowledge level. And this causes a lot of frustration within the kid. And it's the same for all children. If they are not being met according to the knowledge level, the knowledge needs that the child has, the child becomes frustrated. And not being trusted in what you say you can is frustrating. And this can cause anger within the child. I have one student that I have met when he was 17 years old. It was a terrible human being actually at that time, and he has allowed me to speak about him. He was extremely unhumble, and he had a view of humans that was not very nice at all. But he had never met someone who gave him the challenges he needed in mathematics. That was his topic. He is now a very humble person, and he has met other people who knows more than he do. But not being met can also mean, can also risk that you come into self-destructive behavior. Another student that I have met, I also met her. I'm an upper secondary school teacher from the beginning, so that is where I meet the students. Jenny, her arms is cut, a lot of cuts in her arms. She went into self-destructive behavior when she was in somewhere between grade 4 to 6. And she knew everything that she was taught in school. She could never understand what she was going to school for. And when she came to me in upper secondary, it was in the beginning of my learning of high ability. I gave her the opportunity to learn mathematics on higher level, and she says it was the most fantastic feeling she had ever met, being able to learn something in school. So there are many amazingly good teachers who recognize and support their highly able students and see them and support them. But what we are lacking is the structure. What do we do with them? How do we help them to come forward when they come into the next level in school? And so what we need in Sweden and what we are developing in Sweden in many different cities is a structured support. And we need that to create what I would call to create inclusive education. So what we need is teachers to take part in continuous professional development, to be able to continuously learn about new stuff, and that includes gifted education. But it's not enough. We need professional learning communities. We need teachers to collaborate together with each other to create solutions to support the highly able students, as well as other students. In Sweden, we have a very well built up system to support those who have learning disabilities. And that structure can be used also to support highly able students. So how to support them? What we can use is what's called differentiated instructions. And to use differentiated instructions can be used in the regular classroom. And to differentiate instructions, you can do in several ways. And every teacher who teach do in some way or the other differentiate instructions to meet every student's need in the classroom. But there are also strategies that you can use to make it more structured and to communicate and develop it further with your teacher colleagues. And to do so is, for example, to differentiate content, the process, results, and the learning environment. Within differentiated instructions, you can also use acceleration. Acceleration means that you help the child to reach further in mathematics, reach further in mathematics than you are supposed to be in relation to the grade that you are in. So you help them to come further, but you also have to have a plan to help them to come further when you come to the next step. Enrichment is what Marianne Nolte does within her Prima project with the children in their math clubs. They get challenges to dig deep into mathematics, and they can still treat the same content which they are usually in their grade. What they also need is opportunities to learn and think with like-minded peers. And this is a very important part. They need to get together and think with like-minded peers. And this is actually what helps them to develop socially. Simon, the guy I talked to about before, who was very angry, he was not aware of that there were people who could think about mathematics like he. But when he came into those communities where he met people like him, he understood that, okay, I'm actually normal, and there are people who knows more than me. And that helped him to develop as a person. It's a myth that highly able students will manage on their own, that they can take their knowledge further on their own. They need and they have a right to educational support in one way or the other. And if they not are given that, actually highly able students can be excluded from learning opportunities, because it can affect that they drop out of school or come into self-destructive behavior, or that they actually not learn as much as they have, or they are not given the learning opportunities as they have the right to. So in Sweden, we have started to creating guiding materials that could lead to strategies being developed in the country. Our national level, we have steering documents, the school law, and the school law, it says that all children and students should be given guidance and stimulation they need in learning. And this also includes those who quickly reach the knowledge goals. And this is stated in the Swedish school law, which means that highly able students actually have the right to be supported here. In 2014, the first action plan was created in Sweden, and this was voluntary to follow. And it was written by an organization which has national influence, and it was mostly educating for teachers. In 2015, we had a support material which the Swedish National Agency of Education has composed, and it's voluntary for teachers to use, and it is still mostly educating. In 2019, Stockholm has written an action plan for their municipality, and it gives support to start to create a strategy. And at this time, there are other cities in Sweden that are following this action plan. So what's in this action plan that actually can be a support? First of all, this action plan, this guiding material, it gives a strategy for teachers who are going to work with highly able students, and the school health are going to participate in seminars where they are going to learn about high ability and how to support them. They are going to have center schools with experience of high achieving students and mentors which other schools can reach out to and get knowledge and support from. And they will have guidelines on how teachers responses on teacher responses that highly able students value. On pedagogical and organizational measures. And maybe very important too, the guiding material, this action plan is not supposed to be a steady state thing. It's going to be further developed all the time. So it's going to be revised and developed year after year to meet the needs of what the students need. And this is, of course, to meet the highly able students on any age that they are, from the small ones to the big ones, so that they can flourish. And if they like mathematics, that is how they can flourish. And that was my short input. Thank you for listening. And I have a big list of references here.
Thank you so much. I think there are many similarities between the way Sweden is working and works with Scotland in particular. And I can see from the chat there are many similar issues that are arising, and we can discuss some of them when we come to our question and answer session towards the end. We always have more questions than we have time, but don't worry about that. Keep putting your questions into the chat, please. It's great. I'm delighted to welcome our final presenter. I've had a really interesting chat with Andrew. I didn't know Andrew before. We work in the same university, but it's a big university and our paths hadn't crossed. But I was absolutely delighted to find him and to have a chat and to be able to talk about highly able mathematicians. And although I'm here from the University of Glasgow and have been very honest and said I'm not a mathematician, I would like now to introduce you to one of Glasgow's mathematicians. So Andrew, over to you.
Great, so thank you very much, Margaret, for the invitation, and thanks to Neve and Carolina as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about from the perspective of students coming to university and the challenges and the conceptions about the subject that they encounter. So I thought I'd start, let me see if I can get this working. Yeah, so I thought I'd start a bit left field with a definition of an artist that really resonates with me. So an artist is someone who makes art with the skills and materials they have at hand. So in this same vein, I'd like to make a definition today of a mathematician as someone who makes maths with the skills and materials they have at hand. I'd also like to steal your attention for just a second. If you have a second device, I want to ask you a question and we'll come back to that. So if you can go to menti.com and put in this code here, 8262290, and answer this question. The question is the number 1 a prime number? Yes or no? No, it's not a prime number, or yes, it is a prime number. And we'll come back to that a little bit later. So if you can't remember the definition of a prime number, I can give you one. You're free to look up others. Prime number is a number that divides where it divides itself and 1 divides it. So here we go. What is mathematics? What are we talking about? So mathematics, modern mathematics, is the science of patterns. And we don't mean patterns as in tilings, wallpaper, patterns, the work of M.C. Escher and so on. Although these are the explicit study of mathematics, we mean ideas. So for example, Greek mathematics of 2000 years ago was the study of properties of concrete objects. They would take a cone, they would slice it with a plane, and they would find ellipses, circles, hyperbola, parabola, and so on, and study properties of these. Modern mathematics is symbolic, and it's really then that patterns become the object of thought through symbolic algebra and so on. You know, the pattern for this jacket is not cloth, it's kind of the idea, the scheme for the jacket itself. And that might exist on a piece of paper, that might exist just in the designer's head. But mathematics, we should think of this as plural. There's definitely, and when I'm saying mathematics, I mean the mathematical sciences here. I mean computer science, I mean statistics, operational research, the whole gambit of subjects that fall under the very broad title mathematics. But each of these offer kind of distinct modes of thought. Each of them come with their own language. They're intertwined, they build off each other's ideas, and they use each other's. Indeed, one kind of conception of beauty in mathematics is to go and find a link between one language and another language, one area of mathematics and another, to describe the same object with an algebraic language and a geometric language, and have this dictionary between the two. Mathematics is a social, a creative, and a living and breathing subject that is constantly being developed. So why mathematics? It's unreasonably effective at predicting stuff. This is Wigner, the physicist. In complex systems, you know, for example, in predicting the weather or flooding, or in trying to determine that global warming is taking place or what to do about it, in designing new cancer treatments, in scandals like with Cambridge Analytica, and predicting what voters are going to do and then targeting adverts to change what they're going to do. When you log into YouTube or go on social media, what you're seeing is being shaped by mathematics. If you end up in an echo chamber, then that's probably mathematics to blame somewhere. Evidence-based decision-making in government, in industry, in what to do in the case of a virus. This is all mathematics that's sitting behind this. It really is shaping and guiding our lives in overt, in covert ways sometimes. Yeah, I think it was Johann Herbert, German philosopher, who was the founder of pedagogy as an academic discipline. He said, and this is 200 years ago, so it's a little bit dated, his gendered and male-centric, but he who does not employ mathematics for himself will someday find it employed against him. And I think, although he said that 200 years ago, that's where we are now. So I'd like to talk a little bit about common challenges. Oh, my clicker stopped working. It's easy to rectify. Mathematics is cumulative in its nature. So I've pictured it here as a deck of cards, and I'm going to use that metaphor for the rest of what I'm saying here. It's patterns built on patterns. Each layer kind of rests on the next. And both in learning mathematics and in the research at the very forefront of mathematics, this is the idea of stacking and building on the previous understanding goes up in layers. So you can imagine it like a veil, like you get to see another little bit of this tower that exists, that's sitting there, waiting to be discovered, if you like that conception of knowledge. But often what happens in research is we get up to one layer and we realize that the definitions, the ideas, the conceptions that we had are not quite right. And so we kick over a layer of these cards, we make new definitions, we choose differently, and we rebuild. And this happens a lot. This also happens in the learning of mathematics. There's quite often very level specific tricks that you can learn that work beautifully at that level. But depending on where where that individual is going, what they will be doing next, whether they will be going to the next level, those tricks can be really disastrous and require unlearning, which is, well, we all know that as educators, unlearning is, the bane of educating. It takes a lot more than twice as long to unlearn and go back. So I'll ask you again, is 1 a prime number? Do go to menti.com and cast your votes now. We'll come back to that in just a moment. And hopefully I'll be able to convince you that this is one of these level specific things as you go up and down, but we will see. Some more challenges that are encountered as we come to university, as pupils transition into university. A really big focus on mathematics as a calculating engine, rather than as processes, searching desperately for single correct answers. I might ask you a question like, solve the equation 2x equals 1. Does that have a single correct answer? You're probably screaming in your head, yes, Andrew, of course that has a single correct answer. The single correct answer is, of course, x equals a half. But does it? Is that the only answer to the question? Solve it. A perfectly valid answer to this question could be, it has no solutions because the things I'm interested in are whole numbers. That would be a perfectly reasonable. In fact, this is a whole field of mathematics, Diophantian equations, to look at the solutions to equations with integers, solutions to equations only looking at integers. This goes back to, to the ancient Greeks. So there are no single correct answers. There's choice to be made always. Mathematics, really, we see it as a vehicle for clarity and thought and communication. And that's what it means when we go back and we kick over these layers of the tower and rebuild up again. For us, mathematics, for us mathematicians, mathematics is about narrative. It's about storytelling. Of course, we call this the word proof, but that's what it is nonetheless. It's a story, and it's like the very good story Odysseus in his Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey. The journey is much, much more important to us than the destination. So we have often the destination as educators is forced upon us as an assessment that we have to drive ourselves towards. But the journey is where everything interesting happens. I'll give you an example. In trying to remember trigonometric formulae, there are, infinitely many of these trigonometric formulae. You can't possibly learn them all, but you can remember the definitions of trigonometric functions, and you can learn the journey about how to get from one and use some tricks and get to more. And then you don't rote learn the subject. You journey from the definitions that you remember to new formulae, for example. But the output, the destination, you might remember for a day, a week, just a couple of minutes, and you might need to re-derive it again to use it. So a related issue is in explaining this, and I saw this pop up in Mariana's talk. The pupils were not used to writing down their explanations. Yes, this is a really big problem, is this using mathematics as a vehicle for communication, being able to use symbols. So here we've got hilarious. So if you don't know XKCD, go and check them out after today's talk. There's thousands and thousands of Randall Munro's cartoons on all sorts of topics. They're very entertaining. So here we have mathematical symbols arranged by how useful they would be in a fight. And this is kind of sometimes how I feel when I read students' work, that they're just using these symbols as a way of, because they look pretty. And not being able to read them out loud. Mathematics is a language, or languages, and we read it out loud. Okay, so here's another XKCD. Another related challenge is just pushing symbols around without understanding the why. yeah, without understanding the why. So here I've got some examples here of moving around stuff without understanding why. These are all tricks that they might be really good if you're trying to get someone up to a certain level of that deck of cards and then never any further. But when we use tricks to shortcut to get to that assessment, for example, at the end of a level, sometimes we deny people the experience of going beyond there with frustrations, with maths anxiety and so on being built on these things. So here we have some pushing symbols around the page to get to a rather amusing but correct conclusion. Okay, let me go back. If you haven't voted, have a vote. I'm going to have a peek now. Oh, here we go. So I'm going to have a word with Mentimeter about this. I'll tell you why in a second. Where's my sharing? Let me see if I can share this. So here we have. Can everyone see that okay? If you got Menti now, so we have, am I sharing the right one? Let me try again. Brilliant. So the reason I have to have a word with Menti is because if the one on the left is 86% and the one on the right is 14%, then I think their scale is somewhat off. But nonetheless, so no, it's not a prime number, or 1 is a prime number. It depends what time you are in. If I asked you 200 years ago, I would be very, very happy for you to argue that 1 is a prime number. There's no reason why, if you're looking only at integers, you can't argue that 1 is a prime number. If you go to the one level up on this deck of cards, and you start to look at polynomials, and you start to look at what corresponds to prime numbers in polynomials. Polynomials you can add, you can multiply them, and if you look at, if you look up in this level, it turns out that 1 corresponds to a whole class of things called units. And we can't call it a prime number because of the craziness that goes on when you start to look at prime polynomials and fields of polynomials. So if you want 1 to be a prime number, or you want 1 to not be a prime number, it really depends which level you're going up at. So I'm going to share back my slides again. So what happens when we take our students towards the vision of mathematics as social creative subjects, when we start to focus them on the importance of the journey, when we are asking them always to write down their explanations, when we're asking them to apply what they're doing in novel situations, and when we're saying there is fundamentally choice embedded in the subject everywhere, well, the result can often be dissonance, just like these puppies are experiencing. Couldn't resist some puppies in the talk. Okay, so what are we going to do about this? So that's the question. What are we going to do about this? So I can see this stuff coming through in the chat there. I'll leave that to the questions. What we're going to do about this? Well, one project we have at the University of Glasgow is the Maths Inside photo competition. Do follow us. We're on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all sorts. Here you can see some winners from a couple of years ago, and on the next slide, some more recent ones. So this is a photo competition. It's a call for mathematical artists to identify and reflect on the maths that surrounds us. It's judged across the curriculum for excellence levels. We also have, for the last couple of years, an adult category too. So if you're thinking about it, you can join in. We've had, well, that's some of the successes we've had. What I really want to talk about in the last minutes that I've got. So when we see this competition being used by, when it's used at its best by really highly skilled staff, it's being used as a framework for activities, for excitement, and for really challenging learning experiences. And this is good for all pupils, but it's especially good for highly able learners. And it gives them this opportunity to draw inferences, space to be highly curious, to demonstrate the knowledge that they do have. We can, a lot of it takes place as outdoor learning, digital literacy, because we're asking them to work with cameras, add a sticker to it, and so on. And most of all, because it's coming with an investigation and with words, with a description of what they're doing, it's inspiring this love of investigation. It really does, the competition, what we've seen is it really does lift barriers to participation and to engagement in mathematics, because all you really need is a camera, and smartphones are ubiquitous these days. I think, yeah, maybe I'll finish up by saying this, you know, ability is only developed, as we all know, if it's nurtured and if it's supported. So yeah, maybe I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And I think a really good thought there about nurtured and developed, a really good thought to stop on, because not everybody, but many of the people here are, of course, teachers and are in a position to be able to nurture and support. So thank you very much. Would it be terrible to confess I picked the no answer because I like the picture of the duck? Sorry, I couldn't resist saying that. But no, thank you. Thank you to all three of our speakers. It really has been great. The chat has been great as well. And we're going to now pick up on some of those points and ask our three speakers to pick up on them, or if there's anything specific perhaps to Scotland, then Niamh and myself would be happy to pick up on those too. Now, we've kind of tried to cluster some of the questions. Niamh, do you want to have a wee first go at that?
So one of the first questions was around, sorry, Margaret caught me on the hop there, I was doing multitasking. Acceleration. Elizabeth and Marianne, do you want to make any comment on acceleration?
Yeah, I can take that. I have been reading the questions from the chat now, so I see there's a lot of questions about acceleration. And first of all, highly able students are individuals, and they are different to each other. So there are some students who would prefer acceleration and some who prefer enrichment. But both are needed, and I don't think that you can do one without also doing the same, and even if you try to avoid it. But also it's worth noticing that acceleration is scientifically proven that it has been good for highly able students, both regarding their knowledge level and their social development. But on the other hand, there are also research, Linda Sheffield, who are in the mathematical creativity and giftedness field. She also says that it can be counterproductive, I hope it's the correct word, because if you are accelerating the students with a goal to create more students who take university courses in STEM subjects, then it's counterproductive, because in US, where Linda Sheffield works, they have been accelerated mathematics for a long time, but they haven't increased the number of students who study STEM subjects. But it's individual, and this question about their social development always comes up when it's up to acceleration, and it's for their extremely highly able students. They have to, if they are not accelerated, they are staying with their classmates who doesn't understand the way they speak mathematics. And if they can choose to be with students who are maybe 5, 6 years older than them, but they can talk mathematics to them, then at least they have something to talk about. And then it's better.
So I think one of the interesting things that you've raised there is sometimes the difference between qualitative and quantitative research. So we may see when you say has been demonstrated to have an increase, you may see an increase in performance in relation to how they're academically achieving, but the qualitative research may give us a different picture about what the experience is like. And I think that's why it's so important to look holistically at the young person, about the experience, the context, what they need. And we can't see acceleration as a panacea. We have to see it as just one of the tools in our box. And we have to think about effectively. You don't take a hammer and just hit with it. You have to think about how you're using that hammer. Marianne.
I agree totally to what Elizabeth said, but I want to mention that the problems children get in mathematics are easily solved, even with younger children. We had one child who was 5 years old, and he was capable of adding and subtracting numbers up to 1,000 before he entered school. So he wasn't able to multiply, and he also wasn't able to write more than his name. So it's a question what to do with such a child. The development is not orientated on a curriculum, and this is one reason why we say it is very important for these children to have peers who are capable of discussing mathematics or other subjects at the same level as they can do it. And we try to develop problems which are so complex that they are really challenging. And I think some of the students skipped some classes, but many of them didn't do it. And so I think we have to look at every child as an individual and to see what we can do with the children.
Yeah, and acceleration isn't just one thing. It takes many, many forms and can be used in many, many ways. Margaret, do you want to move on to the next question?
Yep. Yes, that would be good. Sorry, I've been putting stuff into the chat there, so I've kind of lost my train. I was listening, but I've lost my train of thought. Yeah, can we move on to the next one? Do you have another one there, Niamh? There's also a question about definition, actually, way back in the chat. I think Christina asked, is there a definition? And the short answer, and I'll let the panelists elaborate, but the short answer to that is there's not just one definition. There is no agreed definition for this. We have statements that we quite often work to. Scottish Network for Able Pupils one is a young person who is working significantly ahead of their peers in one or more curricular areas, or has the potential to, and that's the bit that can sometimes muddy the water. But I'll leave the other three. And I think also it might be interesting to also discuss not just the notion of gifted and talented and what that might mean, but also what is a highly able mathematician? So can I pass that over to colleagues?
I can start there. There are, in the field, there's no definition of, or not one definition of what giftedness is, and there is not one definition of what mathematical giftedness is either. There are several criteria from several researchers, and one thing that is in common is that they learn with ease. They quickly generalize mathematics, and that doesn't mean that it goes quickly in time, but that they through one or two examples can generalize mathematics. Working with patterns, Marianne, I hand over to you.
Yes, it's about working with patterns, but we observed that many students learn to recognize patterns much better than 20 years ago due to the change of curricula. But how you use the patterns and structures you recognize to work on complex problems, that really makes a difference. And again, I wrote in the chat that I also worked with children with dyscalculia. When it comes to children at the other side of the spectrum, I don't know how to pronounce it, you see that you need so many small steps to get at a higher level, that you need some sometimes a very long time to for the children to grasp an idea. And for the very talented students, it is the part is about complexity. How many ideas at one time can they have on mind, and how fast are they capable of abstract thinking? And I think how deep can they go into a mathematical context? This makes the difference. Also, when we did our studies with our problems in regular classrooms, we saw that many of the students enjoyed working on hard problems. It was really nice to see that even children at the lower level of intelligence, we tested them, were interested in doing mathematics. They said with us they do mathematics, and with the math teachers they do the clock, for example. But the difference was about the about the complexity. How far can they go in a certain time? And they are so much faster than others in grasping ideas. And we had one boy in our fostering group who developed a formula. We do not use variables normally at primary grade level, but he developed a formula. He needed 10 minutes to develop this formula, and it was correct. It was correct. How can we handle such a child in the normal classroom? Okay.
Okay, thanks, Maria. Just somebody has asked about, will there be a document at the end of this? So Carolina does an amazing job at the end of each of the TILE seminars. She pulls together all of the resources and then she puts them up on the TILE website. So I know she'll put a link to the TILE website in the chat for you. And it usually takes her about a week, but we're in marking hell at the moment in university. So it may take a little bit longer for this one. So she will make sure that it's available there. And she will tell you a little bit about the end. Andrew, I want to pull you in and say, mathematically gifted young people, first year at university, how are you identifying them?
First year of university, well, the good thing is we give them lots of opportunities. We give them lots of opportunities to work on open stuff, to work in groups and to work on open stuff. I mean, the traditional way that we deal with this is through office hours. So we in lectures and in classes, we pose extra problems and we prompt people to think a little bit more deeply about things, and they come to the office brimming with ideas, and you set them off on little side projects. And when I've been teaching in first year, that's the way I've been developing things. Set extra problems and let people go off in tangents. The wonderful thing about first year mathematics from a teaching point of view is that every single thing that that is in the program is a seed for essentially as a door to an entire subject and domain of mathematics. So it's very, very easy to just say little tiny things that spark off entire conversations. But this is of course intensive because you need office hours, you need time, and you need to make that support available.
Yeah, but those opportunities and opening those doors change lives. They really change lives for young people because it gives them the opportunity to really explore who they are and what they can do. There was also a very excellent question or comment within the chat about how do we stop having to reconvince teachers each year, building on Elizabeth's comment in her presentation about what a child needs. How do we get better at communicating information between schools, between years, between parents and teachers, between teachers and teachers? I know
Can I just make a comment on that? I think it is a real issue for us, but can I say this is not a high ability issue? This is an issue. This is an issue in education. So I, like Mariana, I lecture in autism, I lecture in dyslexia, etc. And those same questions are asked by teachers and by parents as well. It is an issue of how I think schools try how we pass on information, how we use it, the way that information's passed. There's always been a problem, I think, going from primary to secondary. There are mirror image problems between kindergarten or nursery and primary, but there's within year group issues as well. And even when there is a whole through school, we worked a while ago in a whole through school, in other words, a school where there was a nursery, kindergarten, a primary school, a secondary school, and they were all in the same building, in the same campus. Guess what? There was still problems with the way information was passed on. So I think we're going to talk about it in this context, but for me, this is just an issue that we're still, after all these years, grappling with in education.
And it is about trust and how we trust each other's knowledge and professionalism and don't need to reassess. One of Margaret and I's favorite experiences of a school that we went to years ago, we won't say where they were on the same site and campus, but there was a line of tape across the playground so that they didn't cross over. And you're like going, wasted opportunity for cross age and stage and all the rest of it. And it was like, no, on this side of the tape, you're in the primary area, and on this side of the tape, you're in the secondary area. So yeah, hopefully we're progressed upon those times now. And sometimes digitally that allows us to cross ages and stages in really positive ways. Margaret, do we have any more questions left that we need to address? Because we are 6 minutes from the end.
I think just very quickly, and I've tried to answer it in the chat as it's been going on, a couple of people were saying that schools are saying that they can't, I presume it's schools in Scotland, by the way, won't use things like IEPs or GIRFEC, getting it right for every child, the documents within that, absolutely perfect for using with highly able learners. Schools telling them that they can't do that. I think if you go back and look, I've put some links there to, for example, Inquire, the parents' organisation. In actual fact, children of high ability are mentioned in the Additional Support for Learning Act. That was in 2004, so this isn't a recent addition. 2004 was an incredibly exciting year for us in the Scottish Network for Able Pupils, because for the first time the needs of these young people in Scotland were there in legislation. So there is absolutely, definitely things that schools can and should be doing that's enshrined in legislation, and that I would guess they'll be doing for some other young people. So I just wanted to pick up on that. Apart from that, we probably could be here for another hour and a half with everybody. And that's not even to get into the whole debate about prime numbers and when they started. Whether you've started something there, Andrew. I think we need to get you back to do a whole session on is one a prime number? Could we maybe wrap this up perhaps? I'll speak just for a wee minute or two, but just to give some thinking time, which is always good, to our three presenters. If we could come back to you and ask you just to leave our participants tonight with one thought, an important, your kind of top thought about highly able mathematicians. I think this is a fascinating area, and this is an area that sadly, in my view, and wrongly in my view, has been associated often with elitism. And of course, in an egalitarian country, as Sweden is, as we would argue we are here in Scotland, we don't like to be seen to be doing anything elite. This for me is not something that's elite. What makes gifted and talented, not that we use those words here, but what makes any of this elite is the barriers we put up about in relation to access. And so Niamh and I worked very hard to try and get opportunities offered within schools, so that this is not about money, it's not about whether your parents can afford to get you into things or not, but it is about a right, not a need, but a right to have an appropriate education, whether it's mathematics, language, or whatever it is that we might be talking about. So I'm going to stop there and I'm going to come to our three presenters. I think we'll do them in the order they presented. So Mariana, you're up first. Your top thought to leave with people this evening.
During these times, I sometimes read something about a lost generation. And about the sorrows in society, how we can support the students to learn and to stay motivated. And I think the most important thing is not to forget that these children need a special attention, but I think that we have a lot of good materials to support these students. And if the teachers are sensible against these students, I think we can give them the necessary support. It is easy to say this from the green table, because I know that many of the teachers are in a very difficult situation, but I hope we can survive this all and still take care of these children, of these highly able children in mathematics. I think we need them. That's I want to say.
Thank you very much, Mariana. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that we have to do is to create sustainable structures in the system. When I started myself to dig into the field of giftedness, my first goal was, wow, I have to save my own students because I'm a teacher as well. And I started to see them in my classroom. And then I started to do my research and I thought, oh, I can't help so many if I just look in my own classroom. So then I started to work with teachers. And through teachers, working with one teacher, I can reach 30 students. But still, if the teacher doesn't have support, the teacher will not have the energy in the end. So I think that to create strategies from above, from politics, from school leaders, is to create sustainable solutions is extremely important. And together with that, also to increase knowledge among teachers, school leaders, and politicians, because with knowledge, you actually learn to see the gifted child in your classroom. That is, you identify them, and with knowledge, you also learn how to support them. Yeah, so I think that structure, strategies, and knowledge. Thank you for being here.
And Andrew.
I think yeah, I think my final thought is what I gave already, that highly able pupils, and in fact all pupils, are only they only achieve if they're given the opportunity to be nurtured and supported. And yeah, this is what we should be doing.
Great. Somebody's saying that they're looking forward to more sessions, and we are planning more. Carolina is keen to work together, and we have two at least for the new year in our minds. So yes. Keep watching Twitter, etc., and we will be in touch. Niamh, I think you have a final thought you'd like to share.
Well, there's been some very highbrow quotes that we've used here, and I'm going to bring us in another direction. So I'm going to quote Dolly Parton, because she's the woman of the hour at the moment. And I'm going to say, none of us are islands in a stream. We are all better when we reach out and we share the knowledge and we share experience. Just look at the richness of the discussion today. And from this richness, we can really progress forward. None of these kids are on their own. None of these teachers are on their own. None of these parents are on their own, if we're all discussing these things openly and raising the profile of these young people.
What a thought to end on. And I think it sums up nicely what we are trying to do through SNAP, through the Tile Network, through these webinars, and working with colleagues in many other places. I saw the comment from the Philippines about what you're starting to do. You know, no country, even countries that have been doing gifted education for, over 100 years, nobody's got this sorted. And so it has to be culturally relevant. It has to link with what's happening in the countries and so on. But we are all discussing some very similar issues, and it is indeed good to share. So thank you very much. It's been so good to see you all. Thank you so much to our three presenters. That really was excellent. So yes, thank you very, very much. And a big thank you to all of you for coming, and Carolina for all the work you did in the lead up to this and all the work you're just about to do afterwards. Thank you so much. So everybody in these current days, stay safe, stay well, and stay in touch with us too. Good night.